certified incident briefings, real video evidence, strict accountability. You are viewing bodycam incident reports.
Step away from the vehicle now.
You're causing a disturbance.
I'm parked legally. I'm a veteran.
You're making a mistake, officer.
I don't see a veteran. I see someone refusing to comply.
You're not looking. Check the plate. Check my ID.
Turn around, hands behind your back. Last warning.
Then look at this.
Officer Derek Henderson had been patrolling the quiet suburban corridors of Oak Ridge, Virginia for 6 years when he made a decision that would not only end his career, but also cost the county $6.5 million in damages. He was 29 years old, built like a linebacker, and carried himself with the swagger of a man who believed the badge on his chest granted him immunity from consequences. On a bright Tuesday morning in the sprawling parking lot of a Home Depot, he received a call about a disturbance involving an aggressive individual refusing to vacate a reserved parking spot. The individual in question was Marcus Thorne, a 58-year-old retired Marine Corps captain who was loading lumber into his 2015 Ford F-150. What Henderson did next, ignoring license plates dismissing military identification and arresting a decorated war hero in front of a crowd of shoppers, would become a definitive case study in how implicit bias blinds law enforcement to reality. Before we get into the details of this catastrophic failure of judgment, tell us where are you watching from today? If you believe that our veterans deserve respect rather than harassment, hit that subscribe button. We bring you the stories that the mainstream media often overlooks, and your support helps us keep the truth loud and clear. The Home Depot on Jefferson Davis Highway is the hub of weekend projects for the residents of Oak Ridge. It's a massive structure of orange shelving and concrete floors frequented by contractors, suburban dads, and retirees. The parking lot is vast, but the spots closest to the entrance are highly coveted. Right near the contractor loading zone, there are 2 spaces painted with red, white, and blue lines marked clearly with a sign, "Reserved for Veterans." It was 10:15 a.m. on a Tuesday. The sun was high, the air was crisp, and the lot was bustling with the mid-morning trade. Marcus Thorne had been a resident of Oak Ridge for 20 years. He was a man of routine and discipline. Standing 6'2" with a posture that still looked ready for inspection, Thorne didn't look like a man to be trifled with, yet he possessed a calm, quiet demeanor. He was wearing work boots, faded blue jeans, and a plain gray t-shirt that hugged his broad shoulders. He had spent 25 years in the United States Marine Corps. He had led men through the burning oil fields of the Gulf War and coordinated logistics in the dusty heat of Fallujah. He retired with the rank of captain, a Silver Star for gallantry in action, and a Purple Heart for shrapnel he took to the leg during an ambush in 2004. He wasn't looking for recognition. He just wanted to fix his back deck. He had pulled his truck into the veteran's spot, a small perk he rarely used but felt entitled to on a day when his old leg injury was flaring up. He walked with a barely noticeable limp, a permanent reminder of his service. He went inside, bought 6 sheets of plywood and a box of deck screws, and returned to his truck. He wasn't bothering a soul. He wasn't aggressive. He was a man at work. But to one specific person in that parking lot, Marcus Thorne's presence in that spot was an insult. Bryce Miller was 35 years old, a commercial real estate developer who drove a brand new Obsidian black Range Rover. Bryce was a man accustomed to getting exactly what he wanted, exactly when he wanted it. He had never served in the military. His battles were fought in boardrooms and country club dining halls. He arrived at Home Depot at 10:20 a.m., intending to pick up a new grill. He saw the Veterans Only spot, the closest one to the door, and he saw an old, beat-up Ford truck occupying it. And standing next to it was a black man in dirty work clothes. In Bryce Miller's worldview, things had a certain order. Veterans were supposed to look a certain way. They were supposed to be older white men in VFW hats or young clean-cut guys in tacked gear. They weren't supposed to be black men in beat-up trucks. Miller pulled his Range Rover up behind Thorne's truck, blocking him in, and rolled down his window. "Hey, buddy, you can't park there," Miller shouted, leaning on his horn. Thorne looked up from securing his load, his expression impassive. "Excuse me," That's for veterans. You need to move. I'm actually in a hurry. Thorne paused, securing the ratchet strap. I am a veteran. You're blocking the lane. Miller laughed a short, derisive sound. Yeah, right. And I'm the Secretary of Defense. Look, pal, I don't want trouble. Just move your junker so actual customers can park. Thorne turned back to his work, dismissing the man. I'm not moving until I'm done loading. You can find another spot. Miller didn't like being ignored. He didn't like being told no. And he certainly didn't like a man who looked like Thorne speaking to him with such authority. He pulled out his iPhone and dialed the non-emergency police line, adding a layer of panic to his voice that didn't exist a moment ago. Yes, I'm at the Home Depot. There's a man here. He's becoming very aggressive. He's illegally parked in a veteran's spot, and he's threatening me. I think he might be intoxicated. He's shouting at customers. The dispatcher asked the standard questions. Is he armed? Is he physically violent? Miller exaggerated just enough to trigger a priority response. He's got a tire iron in his hand. I don't feel safe. The call went out. Disturbance at Home Depot. Male subject refusing to leave, possibly armed with a blunt object aggressive toward citizens. Officer Derek Henderson was 2 miles away. When he heard the call, he didn't hear check the situation. He heard combat. Henderson had a record that was well known within the department, though rarely discussed publicly. In his 6 years, he had accumulated 14 complaints. Most were for discourtesy or unprofessional conduct. He had a reputation for escalating minor infractions into major confrontations, particularly when the subjects were men of color. His supervisors had written him up twice for failure to de-escalate, but the police union had successfully argued that Henderson was simply a proactive officer. Henderson arrived at the scene at 10:32 a.m., lights flashing but siren off. He swung his cruiser into the lane, blocking the exit path of the Ford F-150. He saw the scene, a pristine Range Rover with a well-dressed white man standing next to it, pointing an accusatory finger, and a large black man standing by the tailgate of an older truck. Henderson didn't see a retired captain. He didn't see a grandfather fixing his deck. He saw a suspect fitting the description. He stepped out of his car, hand resting on his holster, adrenaline already dumping into his system. He didn't walk over to ask questions. He marched over to give orders. "Step away from the vehicle," Henderson barked, closing the distance rapidly. Thorne stopped tightening the strap. He placed his hands clearly on the tailgate, palms open, a habit learned from years of understanding how these situations could go wrong. "Officer, I'm just loading my truck." "I said step away. Get over to the curb. I have paid for these materials. I am parked legally. What seems to be the problem? The problem is you're causing a disturbance. I have a witness stating you're threatening people." Henderson gestured to Miller, who was now smirking, arms crossed, leaning against his luxury SUV. "That man," Thorne said, his voice deep and steady, "is upset because he wants this parking spot. I haven't threatened anyone." "He's lying," Miller shouted from 10 feet away. "He threatened to smash my windshield with that strap, and he's engaging in stolen valor, claiming he's a vet to steal the spot." The term stolen valor triggered something in Henderson. He considered himself a patriot. The idea of someone faking service to get a parking spot offended him personally. He turned his glare back to Thorne. "Stolen valor, huh? That's a new low. You got ID proving you're a vet." "I do," Thorne said calmly. "It's in my wallet in my back pocket. I am going to reach for it slowly." "Don't you move your hands," Henderson snapped. "You're detained. Turn around." "Officer, if you look at my license plate, you will see—" "I don't care about your plate. I care about you failing to comply. You're trespassing on private property and harassing citizens." "This is a mistake, officer. I am a retired Marine Corps captain. If you let me show you my identification—" "Captain, yeah, sure. And I'm a general. You think I haven't heard that one before? You people always have a story. Thorne stiffened. You people... Yeah. People who think rules don't apply to them. Turn around. Now. The crowd had started to gather. People were pushing shopping carts, stopping to watch. Smartphones were raised. The spectacle was public, and Thorne knew exactly what was happening. He was being profiled. He was being judged not by his character or his history, but by the color of his skin and the age of his truck. Officer, Thorne said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming the voice that had commanded 300 Marines in the desert. I am asking you as one professional to another to verify my status before you take this any further. Check the license plate. It is a Purple Heart plate. Run the tag. Henderson didn't look at the truck. He was too focused on maintaining dominance. He felt the eyes of the crowd. If he backed down now, if he checked the plate and was wrong, he'd look weak. His ego took the wheel. I'm done asking, Henderson said. He reached for his handcuffs. Do you think officers should be mandated to verify military status before making arrests in non-violent disputes? Let us know in the comments below. Thorne had a choice. He could physically resist. He still knew how to disarm a man in 2 seconds flat, which would likely result in him being shot or tased. Or he could submit, endure the humiliation, and destroy this man in court. He chose the path of the disciplined warrior. I am complying, Thorne announced loudly for the benefit of the cameras. I am not resisting. I am a retired officer of the United States Marines. This officer is refusing to verify my credentials. Shut up! Henderson grabbed Thorne's wrist, twisting it behind his back with unnecessary force. He shoved Thorne against the side of the dirty truck. The metal dug into Thorne's cheek. Hey! That's unnecessary! A woman in the crowd yelled. He's an older man. Back up! Henderson screamed at the onlookers. Interfere and you're next! He slapped the cuffs on Thorne's wrists. He ratcheted them tight, too tight. Thorne winced as the metal bit into the nerve bundles, but he remained silent. You're under arrest for disorderly conduct, resisting arrest, and false impersonation, Henderson recited, feeling a rush of power. False impersonation, Thorne asked, his face pressed against his own truck. That is a grave accusation, son. Don't call me son. You're not a vet. You're a liar parked in a hero's spot. Henderson yanked Thorne away from the truck. He marched him toward the patrol car. As they passed the rear of the F-150, the license plate was clearly visible at eye level. A Virginia plate with the Purple Heart metal graphic on the left side. The text read, USMC-RET. A man in the crowd, a younger guy wearing a construction vest, pointed at it. Officer, look at the plate. It's a Purple Heart tag. You're arresting a Purple Heart vet. Henderson paused for a fraction of a second. He glanced at the plate. A seed of doubt planted itself in his gut, cold and sharp. But he was too far in. He couldn't stop now. He shoved Thorne into the back of the cruiser. Anyone can buy a plate, Henderson muttered to himself, trying to convince his own conscience. Probably stolen. He slammed the door. Bryce Miller was still standing by his Range Rover, looking slightly less triumphant and slightly more nervous as the crowd turned their cameras toward him. You happy now? The construction worker yelled at Miller. You just had a war hero arrested because you wanted a parking spot. Miller got into his car and locked the doors. The ride to the precinct was short and silent. Henderson drove fast, his eyes darting to the rearview mirror. Thorne sat upright in the back despite the uncomfortable angle of his arms. He was breathing rhythmically, a technique he'd learned 30 years ago to lower his heart rate under stress. He was memorizing details: the officer's name tag, the car number, the time of day, the exact phrasing of the accusations. They arrived at the Oak Ridge precinct at 11:05 a.m. Henderson pulled into the Sally Port, hauled Thorne out, and marched him into the booking area. The desk sergeant on duty was Thomas Mack McAllister. Mack was 55, a former Army Ranger who had transitioned to policing in the late 90s. He had seen everything. He knew the difference between a thug and a man of substance. When Henderson walked in pushing a silver-haired black man in handcuffs who held his head high, Mack's intuition flared. "What do we have, Henderson?" Mack asked, leaning over the high desk. "Disorderly at Home Depot. Refused to leave a veteran's spot. Claimed to be military. Suspect was aggressive with a civilian." Mack looked at Thorne. He saw the way the man stood, feet shoulder-width apart, chin up, eyes alert but calm. He saw the scars on the man's forearms, shrapnel scars. "Aggressive?" Mack asked skeptically. "Verbal threats," Henderson said, taking the cuffs off to process him. "And false impersonation. Claimed he was a Marine captain." Thorne rubbed his wrists where the red welts were rising. He looked Sergeant McAllister in the eye. "Sergeant," Thorne said, his voice filling the room with command presence. "My name is Marcus Thorne. Captain USMC retired. Service number 894-22-Alpha. I have my retired identification in my back right pocket. Your officer refused to look at it." The room went dead silent. McAllister came around the desk. "Henderson, give me his wallet." "Sarge, he's full of it." "The guy. Give me the wallet," McAllister barked. Henderson handed it over. McAllister opened the worn leather bifold. There behind the plastic window was the blue Department of Defense identification card. United States Uniformed Services, Marcus L. Thorne. Rank Captain. Status retired. McAllister stared at the card. Then he pulled out the driver's license. Then he saw the folded piece of paper tucked behind the cash, a copy of a VA disability rating letter. 100% disabled. Combat related. McAllister looked up at Henderson. The sergeant's face was a mask of fury. "Henderson," McAllister said, his voice dangerously low. "Did you check his plates?" I didn't get a clear look, Sarge. He was acting up." "His plates," Thorne interjected calmly, "are Virginia Purple Heart plates, registered to this name." McAllister turned to the computer terminal. He typed in the name. The file popped up. No criminal record. Concealed carry permit holder. Distinguished service record flagged in the state database. McAllister closed his eyes for a moment, exhaling slowly. He turned to Thorne. "Captain Thorne, I am going to remove these restraints immediately." "Thank you, Sergeant," Henderson McAllister said, not looking at the younger officer. "Go to the lieutenant's office. Sit there. Don't speak to anyone. Don't touch your radio. Just sit." "Sarge, the witness said, 'Get out of my sight before I rip that badge off your chest myself,'" McAllister roared. Henderson fled. McAllister unlocked the other cuff. "Captain, I don't know what to say. This is a disaster." "It's not a disaster yet, Sergeant," Thorne said, massaging his wrist. "But it's about to be, because about 50 people just filmed your officer arresting a black Marine for parking at a hardware store." Thorne was right. By the time he was released with a profuse apology from the chief of police who had driven in from his day off, the video had already been viewed 2 million times on X, formerly Twitter. The title was simple: "Hero Marine Captain Arrested for Parking While Black." The footage was damning. It showed Thorne standing calmly. It showed the Purple Heart plate. It showed Henderson screaming. It showed Bryce Miller smirking. And most damning of all, it showed the arrest of a man who was clearly complying. The internet detectives went to work. Within 2 hours, Bryce Miller was identified. His real estate firm's Google reviews dropped to 1.0 stars. His phone began ringing off the hook with angry calls. The Home Depot issued a statement clarifying that they had not called the police and that Captain Thorne was a valued customer. But the real heat was on the Oak Ridge Police Department. The internal investigation was fueled by national outrage. They pulled Henderson's file. The 14 previous complaints were leaked to the press. The pattern was undeniable. Henderson targeted minorities who he felt didn't belong in certain spaces. Captain Thorne didn't go on TV to scream. He hired a high-powered civil rights attorney, a former JAG officer who knew exactly how to dismantle the department's defense. The lawsuit filed 2 weeks later accused Officer Henderson of unlawful arrest assault battery and violation of civil rights. It accused the department of negligent retention for keeping Henderson on the force despite his record. It accused Bryce Miller of filing a false police report. The city attorney took one look at the evidence, the video, the service record, Henderson's history, and told the mayor, "Settle. Pay him whatever he wants. Do not let this go to a jury. A jury will give him the entire city budget." The settlement was finalized 6 months later, $6.5 million. It was the largest payout in the county's history. Officer Derek Henderson was terminated. The review board found that he had violated 6 department policies, including biased policing and unlawful detention. He was stripped of his certification, meaning he could never work as a police officer in the state of Virginia again. Bryce Miller was charged with filing a false police report, a misdemeanor that carried a heavy social price. He lost his job at the firm. His Range Rover was repossessed after he couldn't keep up payments. He became a pariah in the community he thought he owned. But the money and the firings didn't fix the core issue. 6 months after the incident, Marcus Thorne stood on his newly finished back deck. The wood was stained a deep mahogany. The screws were perfectly aligned. It was a job well done. He held a cup of coffee looking out over his lawn. He was $6.5 million richer, but he felt a lingering heaviness. He had survived war zones. He had survived the desert heat and enemy fire. He had come home expecting that the uniform he wore and the sacrifices he made would buy him a measure of peace. He realized now that to men like Henderson and Miller, the uniform didn't matter. The rank didn't matter. The Purple Heart didn't matter. When they looked at him, they didn't see a captain. They just saw a target. Thorne took a sip of coffee. He wasn't angry anymore. He was just tired. But he knew that his fight had made it a little bit harder for the next Henderson to do this to someone else. And that he decided was a mission accomplishment. What do you think needs to change in police training to prevent veterans from being treated this way? Should there be a mandatory cooling-off period for nonviolent disputes? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, please share it. We need to remind the world that respect is earned and dignity is non-negotiable. Thank you for watching and stay safe out there.
Investigation officially closed. For additional unedited footage, remember to like and subscribe. Thank you for trusting Bodycam Incident Reports.